Hello everyone, Gaurav Kulkarni this side. So today I'll be going to share information regarding the Angular components. So first of all, we need to understand what does mean by component. So for better understanding, we can refer this Angular component with the class we have created in the Java. So as we know, the class can contain several methods and several logics for for the user interaction. So that's how the component we can correlate it with the class. So component, you can say the component is nothing but a main building block, so which can contain several logics and some metadata for the for the purpose of user interaction to generate the view. So the Angular components can be defined by using the add component decorator. So component decorator is nothing but the decorator contains several information like the app source, the template URL, the source URL. So that's how it can help the Angular to fetch the data about the components. So the Angular so suppose we have been rendering a Gmail site. So whenever you log into the Gmail, you see there are sign in options, create account options, the Gmail's logo, and several images. So anything can be a website, can be a component. So you can say that all the components together form a UI of a website. So you can say that the component can play a small role in the UI generation. So the component can consist three main blocks. The first one is the template, the second one is the class, and the third one is the metadata. So as we know, the Angular is based on MVC architecture. So in this MVC architecture, uh, we have Angular is based from MVC architecture, in which MVC architecture consists of three main parts. The first one is the controller, the view, and the model itself. So when the Angular, so the when the Angular has been created, the Angular structure has been redefined. So in the as the MVC architecture, the view has to be generated in the MVC architecture itself, or MVC Spring Server itself. But when the Angular server has been introduced, the view has to be as the Angular component consists of three files, that the TypeScript file, HTML files, and CSS file. So the view has kept inside in the Angular itself. So the Angular component has to be generate the view itself. So we can understand the template is nothing but an HTML file which is used to generate the view itself, and the view can be generated by using fetching data from the classes, and this data fetching can be done by the data bindings. So the data bindings has two types. The first one is the event binding, and the second one is the property binding. When the HTML file fetches the data from the class or component, it is called as event binding. And when the class or TypeScript file fetches the data to the HTML file, called as property binding. So we can say that the template are nothing but an HTML codes along with the Angular specific HTML markup language. So Angular markup is nothing but, you know, that we cannot write loops or iterative conditions or logic inside the HTML language. So to help the user to write the logics and loops, the Angular markup has been created. So along with the Angular markup, template and component, the Angular will generate the view. And template can be provided or specified in Angular by two ways. The first one is the defining the template inline, and second one is the provide an external template. And the second main part in the component is called as class. So class provides the data or logic to the view. Basically, class can contain a plain JavaScript code in which methods or metadata or interaction logic has been provided. So the properties of the class can be found in the view using uh, using data binding. The third one is the metadata. So metadata can provide additional information about the component to the Angular. So metadata can consist when the Angular loads the classes, this information to process the class, we can use add component decorator. So whenever the Angular sees a class with at Angular decorator, it will treat the class as a component. So Component has several parts again. The first one is the selector, second one is the provider, third one is the directive, then the styles and style URL, and the template URL. So that's how we can uh, shape the component. But there is a way to create the component inside the Angular. So there are specific commands, like as whenever we write a command in the command prompt or a PowerShell, that is ng means Angular space G space C, and then the component username we want it to be created. So the command in full form as ng generate space component and the component name. So it will create a component along with the four specified file, that as the component dot CSS, the component dot HTML, the component dot TS, and the component dot specs. So the CSS file for the component can be used for styling. The HTML file can be used for to write the business logics, and the JS file can be used to write some metadata and other functions, while the spec file is used for unit testing. So that's how we can create a component inside. Thanks.